Yellow something that's not.
Call Travis names.
Test, test, test.
Testing, testing, test, test.
Call Travis names.
Test. No,
Call Travis names.
test, test, test. Testing,
It looks like it's moving a microphone. Picking
testing,
up something. Yeah, it should be picking up something.
testing.
Good, Travis?
We're good.
Take this thing right off the rip.
All right, audio is on.
Okay, we have quorum, we have everybody we need. Okay, I'm gonna get this meeting started. Welcome to the May 22nd, 2024 BAR Large Meeting. My name is John Robinson. I'll be your chairman this afternoon. With me are James Metters, Luda Sobchak, Seton Brown. Steve Ramos will also be sitting in on the 860 Marston Drive project later this afternoon. City staff present are the city architect, BD Wortham Galvin, excuse me, Lawrence Courtney, Travis Galley. Applicants have been required to submit any documents in advance of this meeting. Staff control the slides. That includes everything that's been submitted by the applicant, by the applicant deadline in accordance with submittal requirements. The applicant simply needs to ask the staff to advance the slide that they want us to see. Applicant, staff, and board members are required to give their name when speaking. This meeting is recorded and live stream, of course. Your presence is your consent to be recorded and on YouTube in perpetuity. The order of the meeting, or the order of each presentation, will be as follows. There will first be an introduction and overview of the project by city staff for the benefit of the board and public. This is followed by the applicant's presentation, which has a 10-minute time limit unless extended by the chair. This time portion may include questions from board or staff. Any and all presenters should clearly state their name and their affiliation with the project when they're speaking. This is followed by the public comment period. All applications are part of a public meeting format. Written public comments were due noon yesterday and have been disseminated where we had them. They will not be read into the record unless determined necessary by the chair and requested by a board member. Any member of the public who is with us this evening and wishes to speak is more than welcome to do so. They are asked to approach the podium and provide their name and address. They're politely reminded there's a 2-minute time limit for those remarks unless extended by the chair. For those who are not with us frequently or have not heard this admonition from me before, comments related to parking, traffic, lot coverage, or livability concerns are not really the purview of this board and therefore should not be part of the public comment or any other comment period. This is in turn followed by city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant is then given a 5-minute period to respond if they choose to do so. They do not have to use the time unless they feel it is necessary. This is in turn followed by a board discussion and a vote on each agenda item. At this point, the presentation is over. Public comment is closed. The applicant may clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising their hand and waiting to be called upon. Board members will then be polled for their comments and then ultimately a vote on a motion provided by a member. The chair, the member of this board, the chair shall reread the motion verbatim. If I've made a mistake, I should be corrected. Once the motion is in proper order and we agree that it is as stated and seconded, each member when voting should say yay in favor or nay not in favor for purposes of clarity. Results of all of our agenda item actions will be posted at the city website, which is charleston-sc.gov/BAR. There have been no items withdrawn as of this evening. There has been no written public comment to be disseminated. And as a final reminder for all present tonight, please turn off cell phones and other disruptive devices. Okay, agenda item A1, approval of the minutes from the May 8th meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes as published? And a second. In proper order, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. A1 is approved. We'll now move to agenda item B1, 134 Columbus Street.
134 Columbus Street, not rated, circa 1950, and then 65 through 89 is requesting extension for full demolition of existing building, originally approved 5/25/22. And then the next slide is just the comment that really explains what vested rights are and that this property qualifies for an extension, their first extension of 1 year.
Thank you, BD. And I know the board gets annoyed by these, but this is a reminder that this is effectively a ministerial act over a vested right, which the applicant has. So can I entertain a motion to extend there's a motion to approve the extension of the demolition. Is there a second for Mr. Brown? Ms. Sobchak, how do you vote? Mr. Brown?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Metters?
Yes.
And myself, yea in favor of the extension of the demolition. Thank you, BD. Agenda item B2, 1 through 11, Ashley Boulevard.
Is not rated new construction in the old and historic district, requesting the 5th 1-year extension of conceptual approval originally granted June 13, 2018. And the next slide has the exact same type of information. They qualify for their final 1-year extension.
Thank you, BD. And so again, this is a ministerial act over vested right. Is there a motion to extend the approval of the conceptual approval of new construction? Mr. Brown moves, Mr. Matters seconds. Ms. Sobchak, the motion's in proper order. Ms. Sobchak, how do you vote on the motion? Mr. Brown?
So are you in favor?
Mr. Matters and myself, yea in favor. The extension is granted. Agenda item number 3, 89 Cannon Street and 1 Carrera Court.
This is new construction not rated in the Old City District. They are requesting approval of the sample panel for the new mixed-use development at 89 Cannon Street and 1 Carrera Court. And this is just context in case anybody's forgotten where this is located. And then we'll have the applicant present the mock-up.
Good evening. My name is Steve Ramos, and I am an architect for the project. Also here with Grayson Baker, who is with Monteith Construction. Grayson is the superintendent.
Steve, can you, just so the people watching from
Sure.
home can hear everything you have to
You
say?
got it. I'll be pretty quick. This is just a site plan showing the overall development. There are really 2 structures in this project, the 89 Cannon mixed-use building, which is on the street, and then the 1 Carrera Court row homes that are on Carrera Court. Next slide. These are photos of the mock-up. And so it's 1 mock-up for 2 buildings. A lot of the details are focused on the 89 Cannon building, which tend to have more intricate details, whereas the row homes are fairly plain and simple. The building is predominantly CMU with stucco directly applied. That's what you see in white. We are using a lime wash on the stucco to give it a weathered look. And then the remainder of the details that you see, the majority of them are wood, so wood trim. On the right, you see pilasters and the cornice, as well as the paneling. That is representative of the storefront that will occur along Cannon Street. And then the punched window is representative of our typical window detail, which is a stucco windowsill, aluminum clad wood windows, and then a wood shutter and wood header. And then the upper cornice that you see, that is the cornice that will be on 89 Cannon. And then the kind of tiered stucco cornice, the more simple, that is what you will find on the row home structure. We have 2 different types of permeable pavers that are on the left. There's a kind of a brown that is the field paver, and there's a gray that will occur in kind of perimeter areas. And then we have some actual brick that will occur at steps. Next. This is just another angle. Next. And I think I can stop there. There are other drawings in the set that just show the elevations if we need to reference those. And there's the details as well. But thanks for coming out to see it this morning.
Very good, Mr. Ramos. Any public comment on this agenda? Seeing none, city staff comments, recommendations.
Staff commend the excellent workmanship on the mock-up. We suggest a double lock seam on the hand-formed copper standing seam metal roof, and we suggest using a preformed parapet cap, but we have no conditions. And we recommend approval with board and staff comments.
Thank you, PD. Any response from applicant, Steve?
We're agreeable to those comments. We think they're sound comments.
Very good. Board discussion and vote.
I thought it was great. That's odd.
So there's a motion to approve mock-up. The second panel, excuse me. Is there a second? Mr. Brown, it's in proper order. Ms. Subject, how do you vote on approval of the second panel? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Matters? And myself, yea in favor. Thank you to the applicant. Agenda item number 4, 860 Morrison Drive. I see that Mr. Bello and Mr. Garris did appear, so
Yes, yeah, we're good.
we're good. All right.
All right, 860 or
Yep,
Yeah.
ready when you are.
Hey, can I have you pass this around? This is the new updated model. Scale and massive.
Right, 860 Morrison Drive The Historic Corridor District is requesting conceptual approval for a 250-key, 12-story Kimpton Hotel with 16,000 square feet meeting and banquet areas, lobby level market bar, and two, rooftop restaurant and bar with pool, and a 4-story mixed-use out parcel building. Here an aerial of the site. And then we'll forward to some existing site photos as well as the context along Morrison Drive. We are ready for applicant presentation.
Okay. Good, 10 minutes in. I'm Eddie Bello with Delegates Architects, and this is Brooke Taylor with TBS Design. So Steve, you weren't here last time, but we were deferred a few months ago, and so we're back. A couple things, if you go to the next slide. Can I control it?
If it works, then go for it.
Test?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, I'm gonna just stop on this because I don't like to see all that text. So last time when we came, actually, most of the comments were very positive. We had a couple of things to work on. Brooke's gonna go through, I'm just sort of giving you sort of a brief introduction. The north facade, the fenestration was asked to be simplified and clarified a little bit. There was a general comment about, since this is a gateway site, that the form of the building should elevate to that responsibility of that site. The view through the site, in between the office building or out parts that we have in the hotel should be studied, to be opened up if possible. And then last comment really had to do with the office building on site, connecting the base and to the rest of the building. Before I'll let Brooke talk, but just to sort of remind everybody, one of the things, so we've been working on this site for a couple of years now. As a sort of a reminder, we had a much larger project that received conceptual approval. Basically, the entire site was covered in buildings. We had an elevated platform. The site's dramatically changed since then, but what hasn't, the program's changed since then, but what hasn't changed is our response to this part of the city. Y'all know this site very well, but just as a reminder, the first phase, very large, multifamily component, the large office building that everyone's aware of, and then our site. And what we've tried to do in each version of these projects is have our site be a quieter, sort of simpler, sort of end to that sort of streetscape. And that's something we strive to do. I think what you'll see is not only have we responded to the comments, we took the comments pretty seriously. We took a step back on the project and looked at it entirely. How can we make the whole building a little more efficient? How can we have it feel a little smaller on the side? And you'll see just a spoiler alert, we lowered the height by 2 full stories over 34 feet. And we eliminated what used to be a big mess here completely through the site. And I think it's really helpful to look at this as we talk, because we had that last time and everyone sort of forgot about it. But at this level, height, scale, and mass, it's really important to look at the form and how the building works on the side.
How it sits in the context.
And how it fits in the
relevant
context.
to its adjacent neighbor.
So go ahead, Brooke.
And Andy, you're talking about from the first application, not.
No, I'm talking about from last time. Yeah,
this time.
last time, yeah.
You lowered the height by.
By 2 stories,
Okay, I just
34
want to be
feet.
sure.
And you'll see, sorry, I'm getting out of
You're fine.
We're not very rehearsed, y'all, sorry. But what we had before, you'll see, and Brooke's gonna explain it, we had a big mass that was right here.
Sure.
And so when you stood on Morrison, you could see through, but not like, now it's wide open. And that's a huge, I mean, in our opinion, change.
So is that a future development site?
No. This is the only future development site right here, which is part of what you're reviewing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to confuse you with the old one from a year ago, but
I knew, I just wanted to make sure.
yeah. All right.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you brought up the 10 stories because it did say 12 on the during the introduction, but we have to each one, we dropped the height down to essentially 10 stories, roughly about 35 feet. I'm gonna click to the next slide. We've gone through some of these already, just context photos of adjacent buildings on this around the site. Let's do this really quick, give you an idea where the site is. Obviously, everybody is familiar with that based on its location. Site plan, we're gonna just go through these really quick. I know we have time constraints, but it's a ground floor. Something to focus on here is obviously the arrival plaza right off Morrison. We've taken some great care to craft that. We've adjusted some lanes based on DOT conversations. We've got the flow working. There's sensitivity to materials and creating more pedestrian experience down there and knowing that you're bringing vehicular traffic through there for drop-offs, and we're being sensitive to that. You see it a little more clearly here. This is the current, apologies for that, we've got current and the previous concept. So this is the current, you see here the change in balance between introducing more greenscape in there, more material, more groundscape materials to kind of knit that together. Some technical drawings here, we'll go through these fairly quickly and we'll pause in a minute on this one. This is the previous concept, and what Eddie mentioned a minute ago is you see the yellow bar at the bottom. That is the old ballroom and pre-function space, which was essentially elevated up at level 2. That was the view blocker. There's pre-function space through there. This is where we are now. So you can see the drastic reduction of that site occupation and mass on that allows clear sight lines through the site. You'll see that when we get into some of the 3D rendering views in a moment. Moving up to the tower, more kind of the stacking of previous versus current. Again, kind of balancing program and adjusting things as we move and shape the building. Typical floors, upper levels where you get suites, and then up beneath the roof where again we've got kind of a pool amenity and a restaurant and bar on the rooftop. Elevation wise, this is the south elevation. Again, on the top you've got the previous one where you see a section cut through what is the ballroom pre-function. And now it's essentially eliminated that and it's pulled back underneath the mass of the hotel tower. Some references to materials, thinking about louver-like materials, wood tones, and we'll talk a little bit more and you'll start to see some of that in the renderings as we talk about the palette. Generally a conceptual palette here. You see different textures and materials. So these we've referenced in the elevation. So again, thinking about how you integrate this into the context is very important. Materials. Relative to its neighbors, you see phase 1 on the far right, the multifamily office in the middle, phase 2, and the proposed hotel here. Again, really referencing that size and scale, and you see it pretty clearly on the 3D model as the relationship to building 2 and the orientation on the site. Aerial views here again, we'll get down at street level and look through this and understand again the massing of the building and how it relates to the street, which is very important. On the top is the previous concept that we presented back in February. The bottom one is the current, and we'll walk through that in a little bit more detail shortly. Again, as you move around, and Eddie mentioned this a minute ago, as you look straight down from Stewart Street across Morrison down through the building, the one on the bottom is the new proposed, so you're getting clear views out through to what would be the Cooper River and the Cooper River Bridge. It's unencumbered. It feels like the movement through there is much more agreeable. We've had conversations about that in the past. We feel like that's been a successful change to this concept. Elevations, this is the south elevation. Again, on the top, you're seeing the previous. On the bottom, you're seeing the proposed. It's beginning to get details in there and create a composition that calms down the facade. And I'll talk more about that on the north elevation shortly. Street level, really very minimal change here. Again, activation of the street. You see this on both buildings, whether it be the hotel building in the distance here, or in the foreground, the office building, mixed use building. Again, really trying to create active uses on these terraces. And if you're looking south on Morrison, standing in front of the hotel, at the street, at the sidewalk. So again, introducing materials that are sensitive to context, and as well as providing a meaningful relationship to the street, which is very important. Views, pulling back a little bit, this is looking south on Morrison. Again, the previous concept at the top, which again was a 12-story building. We're now looking at a 10-story building. So a pretty drastic reduction in height to the building. Some things to focus on here, there was comments about balconies. You're starting to see balconies absorbed into the material or the mass of the building versus being additive elements. So we think that that's a benefit you're beginning to see. Here, previous on the top, current on the bottom. Again, reducing the height of the building, taking mass out of the site, introducing some regularity and some rhythm in the facade, looking at ways to break this down from a fenestration standpoint, but creating an order and rigor to the facade that was addressed last time was one of the comments. So we're making sure we develop that more clearly. And you see it here in this enlarged view, somewhat more detail. Its corresponding elevations. On the lower one, you're seeing again the registration of the grid pattern there, the simplification of the facade, organizing those elements along the facade. Views, this is the on-ramp as you're approaching the Morrison Drive on-ramp it is. Seeing this in context relative to its adjacent neighbors on the bottom is where we are today with the design. So again, you see how it sits down much lower than its adjacent neighbors. These are views inbound on Highway 17 across the Cooper River Bridge, previous before. The one on the bottom is where we are today. So again, addressing simplification and refinement on that exterior facade, particularly as you think about the ends of the buildings and the relationship of those views as you're coming into the city. Somewhat of an elevated view, again, just really to highlight some of these things. Bringing the meeting and banquet space, which you see on the far left, which opens up onto outdoor terraces, and again, kind of getting some of this program tucked into the building as a way to economize on site footprint and minimize impact of the site, reduce scale and mass to the project. Before and after the aerials here. So again, you see on the top is where we were before, and the lower one here is where we are today, based on. Okay, comments from previous year were relevant to what is the out parcel building, the office building. I think we've addressed that in a lot of ways that are really helpful. Comments before were the building feels elevated up on concrete pilote. It doesn't, very sensitive to the context, doesn't relate much to the hotel. So what we've done is introduce material that begin to pull themselves down from the upper part of the facade and engage the lower part of the building, making that much more express kind of language that carries through for both the upper part of the building and the bottom, without eliminating the idea of this transparency to the site. Just zoomed in view of that. And the corresponding elevations. Street level view of that particular building at its base. Again, the velocity and movement through the site is very important in creating active uses. Materials are pretty consistent with what we had before the elevations. Views looking north on Morrison, again, above is the previous concept. The current one today is really an adjustment based on kind of looking at the hotel tower's relationship to the street. We feel like there's a good synergy between these two buildings as they approach the street, but being sensitive and aware of that separation from the street, not crowding the urban edge. Again, scale relevant to other adjacent buildings, element plants, landscape, and other materials. And I think this is the last slide. We'll stop here. Anyone you wanna?
No, I think just, thank you. I think just to summarize, I feel like we responded to all the comments and then some. I think really the main comment last time was to study the fenestration to simplify it on the north facade. That's what we left as our directive. We were all confused, but that's what we sort of figured out later. But we did a lot more. I've always thought if you can lower height generally on a building, that's a good thing in our city. And definitely if you can reduce the massing so that you can see through the buildings. I think the view from Morrison Drive, now where you have two distinct buildings and a clear path through is a significant change. So again, this is conceptual. So we know there's a lot of work to be done, but we're excited about where we are and we hope you guys agree.
Thank you. Very good. Any public comment on this agenda item? Mr. Hart.
Here in part of the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would like to thank the applicant for meeting with us to walk us through the design updates since the previous meeting. We appreciate the team working to address the board's comments, especially the effort to separate the buildings and create a better view corridor to the water. However, we feel the design of the hotel has taken a step backwards. In particular, the extension of the footprint causes the building to have an overwhelming massing that is fully visible from the surrounding roadways and view sheds. The proposed north facade is around 360 feet long, which for context is over 100 feet longer than the office building next door and roughly the length of a football field. Though the building was taller before, it felt less imposing because of its smaller footprint and slender, elegant proportions. Now, the large scale of the building is felt more prominently on the streetscape, and squattier, horizontal facades make the building appear much more massive. On the architecture, while the north side has certainly improved in terms of rhythm and simplification, the amount of blank wall space, particularly near the front of the building, as well as the top floor and the base, feel more pronounced and conspicuous. We feel more study is needed to address the unattractive blank wall sections, to create better vertical proportions, and reduce the overall scale and massing of the hotel, which will forever be a gateway landmark building for Charleston. Therefore, we ask the board to defer the project as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahar. Mr. Schweber.
Good evening, Justin Schwell with Historic Charleston Foundation. We'd like to thank the applicants for meeting with us to review the changes to this application. And we're encouraged to see the height, scale, mass, and intensity of development on this parcel continues to be reduced. While the building has been extended towards Morrison Drive, the reduction in height and elimination of some of the pre-function and ballroom spaces has helped to open the site and maintain visual sight lines to the river. We also find that the material changes on the ground floor of the mixed-use building create a stronger base and a more unified design that helps anchor the street front corner of the development. Unfortunately, we do have concerns over the architectural direction changes and the material selections on the revised application. The north elevation in particular has seen a significant reduction in the depth and articulation of the facade and the more muted color palette. There are also large swathes of unbroken bands of material on the lower stories, curtain walls surrounding the protruding window bays, and the north wall of the penthouse level. These design changes have flattened the facade and reduced the overall visual interest in the character of the architectural expression. While the material treatment and refinements of the depth facade elements may be a discussion for preliminary review, we feel it's incredibly important for a building of this scale and at such a preeminent gateway to the city to make use of bold and exemplary architectural design and the highest quality materials. We feel the work needs more study on the architectural direction and material choices for this to become a successful application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schweber. Further public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendations?
Sure, and I will make sure the meeting minutes reflect it's 10-story, not 12. We usually take that off of the application. We may have mistakenly taken it from the February. So just know that we're.
Thank you.
All right. And also we want to commend the work that went into this restudy. We really appreciate it. Applicant responded to staff and board comments regarding the design of the shared street concept by providing a direct connection between Morrison Drive to the natural side of the site. The changes in the hotel massing and resulting location of the ballroom and pre-function spaces facilitate the ability to provide this public space amenity, which allows visual and physical access across the site. The redesign of the shared street with additional landscaping and human-scaled elements is now less car-centric. With the ballroom structure gone and now subsumed within the hotel tower, the surface parking lot at the back of the site is a missed opportunity for further enhancement as a public amenity on the natural side of the site. Staff encourage exploring an occupiable roof structure over the parking, which would allow for a larger outdoor space at level 2 for both public and patrons of the hotel to enjoy good weather or some other way of leveraging this portion of the site beyond surface parking. The height, scale, mass of the hotel building is modified to a longer, lower volume. Staff supports this as it facilitates the program changes within the building to allow for better public space resolution on the ground floor, as well as towering less over some of the more modest existing structures on Morrison Drive. The height, scale, mass of the mixed-use building has not changed, and staff still supports its configuration. The design changes in architectural direction of hotel facades also respond to board and staff comments by introducing a lighter and more integrated palette by reducing the contrasting material colors. The facade is compositionally more unified and less a set of individual elements. This is particularly true of moving the balconies within the facade's framing rather than having them articulated as objects. The lengthening of the massing does provide compositional challenges for the facade. The north facade is more successful as it uses insertion of blank panels to facilitate breaking down the fenestration bays into distinct areas. And in this case, the increased length of the building responds well to the movement of the highway. The south facade, while less visible than the north, could benefit from the same approach, as the increased length on this side leads to monotony in that facade. The applicant also responded to the architectural direction request for the mixed-use building to have a more unified architectural expression between the piers and the base and the main volume of the building. Staff conditions for approval. 1, continue to study and refine the compositions of the north and south facades on the hotel tower during preliminary phase. 2, continue to study and modify the surface parking area into a public amenity to leverage access to the natural portion of the site. Staff recommends conceptual approval with board and staff conditions.
Very good. Any response from the applicant at this point?
Sure. I think we agree with all the staff comments and appreciate the acknowledgement that we did respond to the board comments. Touching on some of the public comments, thank you as always. We enjoy talking with the preservation groups regarding the north elevation feeling too long. To reduce some of the massing, it had to go somewhere. And so when you make a building lower and you take out a big chunk, the building did grow some. It didn't grow significantly. It was already a long building, but it grew some. We think that if that's a better trade-off to have a little bit longer facade, but less so as you see it from the street. You're driving by it on a highway, you do experience that. But we think it's much better to have a smaller building on Morrison Drive. I will say part of the study that we took was direction by the board was to simplify that facade and regulate those windows. We're happy to study that further at the next level. Adding more windows to the sort of the areas where there aren't windows will actually, I think, make the building longer. So I would disagree with that direction. The other comment about adding more light and a little more articulation on the north again, we like that. I think that's something we would want to study next time. We're just trying to get through the conceptual. But again, we toned it down. We greatly simplified it for what the board said last time. So we're happy to dial that up a little bit more as we study it. Hopefully. So.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Board comments.
Great question. Is this a FEMA zone?
Yeah, so
Yes.
so we forgot to tell you, is it okay if I?
Sure.
Really quick, so we're in Limwa, which is basically out of the zone. So nothing below the floodplain can be occupied other than stairs and elevators and that types of things. Has to be basically breakaway, water has to go through. So yeah, that was a big part of our presentation last time. I skipped over that, but we spent a lot of time. I mean, we've got to be up pretty high, a lot of time figuring out how to still have the building relate to Morrison Drive and create a good active streetscape. And you can see that in the terraces and all the storefronts that we have.
I want to add, I want to ask you one more question also. Sheet A, 36. It makes me nervous, Eddie.
That one?
Yeah, it's fine. It's up, that.
Well, Aaron, I'm sorry, Brooke or Aaron may be able to explain it better. I think this is actually what this was responding to. What do you want to know? Why?
It just looks, it's a big wall, that's the appearance of it. And, as you look through the different renderings, and I'm gonna comment on this in a minute. Some of them, I don't know if it's lighting in the computer. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but in some cases, it looks like there's just a big frame that's hung on the outside of the building. And that's both with the previous and the current. And then when you come to that big, it just looks like a big white wall. And I just,
Yeah.
I mean, is that,
Well-
I mean, I understand what it is. I've looked at it on the plan, but
Well, real quick, I will say, never want to blame renderings. I'm gonna blame the renderings a little bit. The renderings we had before, I think, work better. We talked about this today. So that's our mistake, but that's unintentional. The depth, some of the things that Justin talked about are basically, I hate to say it, it's more rendered way it's showing up. I think my answer here, and it's really a compositional thing. You need some balance with how the administration works. If we continued this further, which we could, you need something to balance out that competition.
because you have it on the other side also, it's just, it doesn't appear to be as big in the rendering. And it didn't look at the measurement, but I don't know what the slide number would be to go to the other side, but you can, Lawrence.
The south side, I think it-
Go back.
where you can do
Uh,
yes, if you know where the slide deck is organized.
You might wanna-
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, also, right.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind
Also
of,
because it's angled.
because it's angled, yeah, no, I got the why it's showing that way, but if you look at what I guess would be the southeast corner versus the southwest corner, I might have those. directions
Yeah, this
wrong.
is actually the north, this is your north.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so but that's
Yeah.
much more
Yeah,
palatable than the opposite end.
we agree, and they're both suites on both ends of those now. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, I know we've been
Now see it
looking.
here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are you talking about this south? I'm sorry, yes. It's dramatically different here. I think the rendering on that view is somewhat elongated, so it's probably not helping it. There is some composition. We've gone through and reworked the suites on that corner of the building. We've adjusted the balconies. I think there's, if I'm not mistaken, some bed walls along there, head wall of the bed. So I think to Eddie's earlier point, I think it warrants further study to think about that, because you're right, it does, comparing that to previous concept. I think there is a little bit of adjustment that needs to happen there, because it does feel a little too broad and too.
So I mean, how wide is that? That wall?
Where's the model?
Yeah.
Here's the model, you can see it better.
Yeah, so let me bring this in.
So it is 1 inch equals 60.
Right.
So there's the area in question
That's
primarily right there.
And I looked at it when I had. the
Yeah,
model up
so-
there, But as compared to that.
Yes, you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty
Right.
dramatic.
You still see it.
So, I mean, it could be a matter of replicating this alignment of the grid here that's applied, sliding things around. I think we certainly can look at that in that room configuration. Does it add another bay? So that's probably in the neighborhood of,
Would you say 15 feet?
15 to 20 feet. So
I'm just,
Maybe slightly longer.
and
You look at the balconies here, Elias, it seems like there's more depth in the balcony, more linear depth in the balconies. And the balcony is the same on both sides. There is a matter of creating more of a balcony exposure on that north facade to really kind of mitigate some of those concerns.
so I looked at the interior floor plans to see why it is, right? And I get it, but that's troubling to me, and the opposite, the other end of the building, it's quite nice.
I think you do see that, and yes, certainly moving forward, I think that's certainly something that could be adjusted. I think we look back at that. I think nothing's set in stone. I think we're certainly developing that and understanding that, and absorbing comments. And then taking those to the next level and then beginning to develop that, so we understand that that's a.
So it's okay, I'll just go ahead and just dive in, thank you.
Yeah.
To me, the building is sort of nautical, and that's a sail there. And so, and it's balancing the void and the solids. So I'm looking at compositionally as well, so, I don't have any issues with that personally. As far as we keep talking about north elevation, and it's originally was too much, now it's not enough. What we're doing. So I think you're there, is that, because again, it's a sort of highway building, so you have this, stuff. You go and you drive through and you see it. Repetition. I also, actually, I do think that moving forward, the facade closer to Morrison Drive is actually works better with the context of the building around. It's an urban environment and all the buildings around different style, architectural style and all that, but they have a presence on Morrison Street. So I think it's important in that level up front. I always had a little bit difficulties with that, such a long and far and what you do with it, but now it's, to me, it's a good base and support. So I mean, with exception of, I think what is in staff comments, look at that back parking and give a little bit more life to it and function. I think to me, we are there. Okay.
Thank you. So I want to start with Andy. I think you did begin to respond to board comments. I don't think it's responded to board comments now, but you moved in the right direction. So I think that's good. And I know you made a point of that, so I wanted to make a point back to you. So I feel like if we look at sheet 36, 37, 40, and 41, which we've all seen them, but it's a different version of what we saw before, but it's a better version. At least that's what I think. It still seems that there's these frames that just get built and then hung on the outside of the building. But I like this frame better. And again, when you look, I did pick up that it's the same building I'm looking at in this sheet and this sheet and this sheet, but it looks different just because of whatever in the computer that y'all understand. I don't know how that works, but
I think the renderings in different scale too, so it's a little bit misleading.
But here's the thing that's consistent for me. I mean, you're dealt this site and you've just got to put a big giant structure on it, and zoning allows you to do it. And so that's what you're doing. I think this giant structure is bigger than the previous giant structure. I like the office building, and I like that the way that it appears from Morrison Drive. I think it looks great. So.
Thank you, Mr. Matters. Further board commentary.
Can
Mr.
you
Ramos.
go to that slide 86 that you alluded to? And of course, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I didn't experience the comments from before. I do agree that the comments have been listened to in terms of the simplification of the facade. There are some fundamental parts of the buildings that I struggle with, particularly the top of the building. To me, seems like it is a step backwards when we go to the A36. When we get there, it's troubling to me to have such a long expanse of blank wall at the top floor. Now that we've seen these buildings at Morrison Yard, we can see them from Mount Pleasant, and they're very visible. And I think the tops of them are arguably the most important parts of these buildings. Typically, I would say the ground floor, but since this part of the town is just not a great pedestrian experience, it's almost hard to make a good ground floor over in this part of town. So the top being really important, we have, as Ms. Mahard pointed to, about 300 feet. Not a lot of glass at that top floor, which is extremely visible. Then there is some sort of, I guess, step up for mechanical and then another step up. And so I just think that could be done more effectively, whether it's adding more glass or figuring out a way to integrate the mechanical more seamlessly into that top. To me, that's really important with this building. The middle is great. I think the middle of the building works really well. The blank wall, I don't really have a problem with it in this case, except for at the top. I do think it's problematic. If we could go to slide 44. The office building, I don't know, I struggle with it. I struggle with it because I just don't see how it's a Charleston building. I feel like it could be anywhere. I guess the argument could be made that this part of town has that anywhere feel to it. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but I just struggle with the office building, and it could also be that the color is somewhat ominous. And I don't think it's just that it's a modern building, it just feels like it could be anywhere. So again, I apologize to everybody that I wasn't at the previous meeting, but I think those are some fundamental things for me that I just really struggle with.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Further board comments?
I agree with nearly everything that's been shared by everybody on the board, and then also my preservation organizations, which really puts me in a real pickle because I don't know what's the most important thing to share. First off, I think it'll be surprising for me to say this, but I'm incredibly surprised that the ballroom and the pre-function area have been removed from the site, and think that that was really what made the project come together. Even though I know that my colleagues are concerned about the activation to the marsh, but to me, it looks the project as a whole now looks unfinished, especially that we've just replaced it with surface parking. And I'm concerned that we removed the green roofing from the Morrison Street side of the building. I'm not sure if we're ever going to be able to get the highway, the northern elevation, quite right for what it is. If we wanted to break that up, then we would swap the buildings, right? But that's not gonna happen. I don't have concern over the office building and the architecture, because everything else on Morrison is drab and dark and not of Charleston. So that's the context that the board has built in that area. And so that's what I think that we can go with. I do have concern over the top level element of the mixed use building, but those are my comments.
Further board comments? I think the applicant responded to what we articulated, specifically that because the fenestration was such an integral part of the architectural direction of a building of this size, it's unquestionably simplified. It's unquestionably more rhythmic. The issue is it a different architectural direction now that it is a lower, somebody used the word squat, more squat building as opposed to one that's a little more imposing. And you've got to make the mass work somehow. Do you want the height immediately adjacent to the bridge, or are you willing to stretch the building out on something that most people are passing at 55 or 65 miles an hour? I think the applicant responded to what we asked them to do last time, but that did not account for the significant lengthening, or maybe not significant lengthening, the lengthening of the facade on the north side. I think the mixed use building is great. I think everybody's been a little hard on it. We've got I would remind folks that one phase of Morrison Drive is sparkling white. Notice that every time we pass up there. So there's actually a pretty varied color palette up there. This mixed use building doesn't bother me. The mixed use building hasn't bothered me since day one, as well as the general Morrison Drive articulation. Is surface parking on campus inferior to the previous designs? Yeah, probably. I think again, it's a reflection of what the architect is trying to do based on what we have asked them to look into, so. And I don't recall a lot of prior conversation about the roof structure and the fenestration of it, but certainly, again, with the elevation being this long, as Mr. Ramos points out, it may bear restudy as to see how it can be punched or made to integrate a little bit better into the central massing of the building. And I think I'll leave it there. Height has been reduced. Scale is what it is. It's a very large building for the site. We've known that. Others have commented on that. I don't think the massing is inappropriate in relation to its neighbors. The applicant took it upon themselves to have a slight change in architectural direction with the volume and the facade that presents to the north side, but I don't know that it's inappropriate within the context of the neighborhood, nor what this board previously asked folks to look into. So those would be my comments.
Well, it's big building to the side, but it's kind of testifies this one's a little bit. It helped.
I think all the buildings over here are just tall. So whether or not they're this tall or this tall, I don't know that it makes, much difference. It's whether or not it's the architecture is, is improved or goes the other way.
And I celebrate the drop in 2 floors.
What's that?
I celebrate the drop
You
in
did.
2 floors.
And I think integrating the balconies, making everything less fussy, I would agree. Again, I think there's a little pushback on, wait a minute, those preliminary review issues, and generally they are, but given the massing of this entire building and its general architectural direction and this 340-foot facade, it's important to agree early on that conceptually this is the architectural direction of what the fenestration is going to be, rather than us having to deal with issues of large blank walls or voids or questions about whether there are going to be balconies or not at a later date, and then trying to figure that out after the fact. So I think the applicant was responsive in that regard. Further board comments? Or a motion?
I think I will move for the conceptual approval with staff and board comment.
With staff conditions and board comments. Okay, there's a motion to conceptual approval of this project, incorporating staff conditions and board comments. Is there a second to that motion? I'll second that motion. Motion's in proper order, so I'll proceed to call the roll. Mr. Ramos, how do you vote?
Nay, not in favor.
Nay, not in favor. Mr. Brown?
Nay, not in favor.
Ms. Sobchak?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Metters?
Mr. Chairman, I need a minute.
Okay. We'll wait for you. Contemplate that. That is fine. But we won't take a recess or anything else so as to not have an issue with 40 down the road.
So I wanna ask you for some help on something.
Okay, sure.
General architectural direction.
Mhm.
Moving from conceptual into preliminary.
Mhm.
This is a struggle for me here. It will be a struggle for modification as I look at the interior layout also. And I'm trying to get some guidance on general architectural direction and conceptual. We moved to preliminary. So we've got this height scale mass, but there's some detailing on the outside. I've made my comments. I'm just expanding on those specific comments though. So when I get to preliminary, and some of these modifications can't be made.
And we've encountered that before, and you and I have discussed that. I would say, of course, if you're not comfortable with that, you can vote against it. But the other thing to do would be to see if Ms. Sobchak would accept a friendly amendment to have restudy of one or more elements.
You can make it a condition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they,
And
they already said they will be looking at it on
Yeah.
their own.
But I mean, Luda was actually comfortable with that. And that's why,
Well, potentially the condition is just a restudy of the general amount of blank wall space. And if you look at new buildings in Charleston that have blank walls, largely they're unsuccessful.
yes, we have a litany of those and more recent construction, unfortunately. Not to be clear, not and unfair to the applicant, not to the extent where this is on the lower end of the scale of woe. But that we've had failures in that regard, and we all view them, I think, a little more with a jaded eye based on experience in the past 10 years.
so, Mr. Chairman, this is a massive deal.
Yes, sir.
So I'm gonna say no, nay, not in favor, but I want to add to that. My nay, not in favor is limited to my comments that I made and not the project, the large, huge project, but restudying the things that I said in my motion.
Duly noted. And I would vote yay in favor of Ms. Sobchuk's motion for conceptual, which was for conceptual approval with staff conditions and board comments, but it fails for lack of a majority. So I will then entertain another motion.
Well, I'll put one forth. Although I did not, particularly like the office building, it seemed like I was in the minority. So I would be okay with the conceptual approval of, what you were calling the mixed use building, I'm calling the office building, that. building.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Conceptual approval of the office building, but a deferral of the hotel or restudy of the amount of blank wall space. And just a general comment, blank wall space on the building.
So, Mr. Ramos, your motion would be for conceptual approval of the mixed use or office building, the south structure, with a deferral for restudy of the amount of open or blank wall space on the north structure, incorporating board and staff comments.
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
I was under the impression that we were not going to part and parcel.
That we weren't, or that
We're
we
not.
can't.
We're not, I don't know if we can't.
I don't know that can't is not the word, to the extent that there's a warrant. Maybe I'm having a bad memory night, but I don't recall.
No, it's not a can't, but usually the separation is say between improving a site plan, meaning landscape and hardscape versus building. But usually they're not one building, so.
And I don't think it helps them to separate anyway.
So after Mr. Metter's question or point, Mr. Ramos has a motion is,
So I could just, seeing that board and staff comments that generally people are okay with the office building, it does not need to be a condition. So it's a deferral on the project with board and staff comments and asking to restudy the amount of blank wall surface on the hotel.
On
Okay.
the top and on the side.
I think rather than being specific, I just looking at a general overview.
so Mr. Ramos, you're amending your motion before it was seconded to take the mixed use
Correct.
separate bifurcated office building off there. Okay. So your motion is for deferral, the purpose of restudy of the amount of blank or open wall space on the hotel structure,
Correct.
incorporating board and staff comments.
Right.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, the motion's in proper order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
Yeah.
Ms. Sobchuk?
Nay.
I'm sorry, nay, not in favor? Okay. Mr. Ramos,
Yay in favor.
Mr. Metters, and myself, nay, not in favor, but the deferral passes 3-2. Agenda item B5. This is a proposed modification of the rules and procedures of the board on mandatory meeting requirements.
Thank you, board, for letting me take your time for this particular motion. The prop I'm holding up here is one that was emailed to both boards prior, which is that we are asking for modifications to Appendix B, which is rules and procedure of the Board of Architectural Review. In the email, we explained the background of what we wanted to do immediately, but really that requires a larger, broader look at the appendix itself. In order for us just to be able to be a little bit more nimble to make changes in. So for instance, in this particular section, we're asking for the ability to be more flexible on meeting times when meetings happen. You could imagine if there's restructuring within our department, that maybe all of a sudden our board meetings need to happen on Tuesdays. And by having a very specific date and time, it makes it more difficult. We don't have to come back every time things might be changing in the future for that. I mean, obviously, it has been communicated both in September at, I think to the whole, it was prior to my time, at a breakfast with some board members in January and again at another breakfast in April, that all were invited to and some attended, that the intent right now is to be able to provide staff more time, meaning between deadline and the actual board meeting, which is going to allow us to assess applications completeness, their standing to apply, follow up with zoning and TRC issues, and also being able to contact applicants accordingly prior to the publishing of a public agenda. Right now, it's so tight, we struggle to do our due diligence and meet the requirement of that public notice for everyone to know about. So part of this is being able to now give us more breathing room between submission deadlines and the actual board meeting. So we're not sending out 3 agendas prior to something happening. We can do all our due diligence and the applicants get better service, you get better service, and staff is able to do their jobs with the highest level of professionalism. So that's like the heart most of these changes that you see here. And know that this is going before small as well, that the exact same document, which is in the whole here, but on the slides just shows the pages that would be changed, are meeting here. And it allows us to do some of this testing. And as we get data on what is working and what is not, that we don't have to keep changing the appendix. As we realize now that we have this data and feedback from you, from the public, from staff, here's the next change we want to test out. That it allows us just to be a little bit more nimble in that sense. So again, these changes are specifically speaking to broadening the ability to have the public notice. And because we're extending the deadline time, it allows us to give more time for that too, meaning the public now gets 8 days notice as opposed to 5. Which is feedback that we've been getting. So that's what you're seeing in these all relate to this. Public notice is now going to be extended from 5 to 8, which these allow. Some of the changes that you see here are really administrative, coming from department head. The first set were really more from division staff, the rest is from department, cleaning up things that have been happening since 2017 when this was passed, versus what this says, right? So that, some of this, the clerk of council or secretary, right? The clerk is now preparing minutes for each meeting, staff is preparing minutes for each meeting. So all of these changes towards the back end are really about housekeeping of what we actually do versus what this document says. I have lots more information, but I don't want to burden you with that. I'd rather you ask questions and then I'm happy to provide you with whatever information you require.
So I sent you an email this morning.
Yes. So that's part of what was approved in 2015. The 24-hour notice for special meetings, that's for instance, when we hold a breakfast so legal can do a refresh. Those are what those special meetings are those that we're providing the public with a 24-hour meeting before, 24 hours notice before we might gather to discuss procedural issues of the board.
So that makes perfect sense. So it's
Yeah.
not a meeting of the. board.
No, it's when I say, hey, everybody, I'm gonna provide pastries and legal's gonna do a refresh. It's those types of meetings.
Because that still requires notice under form.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I thought it
generally,
was-
we're advertising those way in advance of 24 hours, but if we decided we had sort of an urgent meeting, we could let the public know that the board is meeting to discuss rules and procedures.
Well, that was my only question. I
Yeah.
thought the rest of it was as we talked about back in January.
Mhm.
It's,
Any other questions?
Well, the one meeting a month, you know, it's got pros and cons to it. I think it's
Yeah.
good for the board and the staff to spread it out. I think, you know, for the applicants that,
So we have studied that
Yeah.
in detail. And I'm happy to provide anyone, I don't think you were at these, for the previous city architect, Troy Parrish, I'm trying to remember them on the record, did about 8 different spreadsheets where she studied calendar times comparing BZA, like time from BZA submittal to a BAR submittal, a BAR resubmittal, and I'm happy to provide those to you. In all cases, it was a wash. It was either the same amount of time, or in fact, it made it better. And usually when it made it better is because you're moving from BZA to BAR. Even with that only once a month, it actually shortened the time between when you would move from BZA to BAR. And it surprised us too, but we did all sorts of studies and permutations of this.
that makes sense. I was thinking about it more. I think we're gonna submit on Monday.
Yeah.
We're not quite ready, but then we gotta wait 4 weeks if we don't make that deadline. And so those are the kind of
Yeah.
things as the architect and developer, you're
Yeah.
always trying to.
I get it. We'd like to test it because what's happening right now in such a tight schedule with large and complex projects is that sometimes we discover, if you all have noticed in 2024, we've had a lot of weird withdrawals and deferrals that could have been avoided if we had more time to assess the applications when they come in and then have that conversation with the applicant and say, this is what we've noticed. Do you still want to move forward? Or we don't think that you might want to move forward and here's why. And we've had I think the board can test a very large number of these deferrals and withdrawals. And my assessment is it's happening because we just don't have enough time to do our due diligence, have a conversation with the applicant, and then give time for the applicant to decide, do they want to stay on the agenda or pull it before it has become an official publicly, published agenda. So part of that is which I think is in service of the applicant, so that there's not all these things appearing like, and everyone's speculating, why did they pull it? Why is it gone? Right? That would be all internal between us and the applicants, so that then what's published is truly what's gonna come before the board.
Well, also, you know, I think it's better for projects overall. And, you know, we need to educate those developers, they take their sweet time on the due diligence. But then suddenly, they want everything yesterday.
And it will give the board more time to assess these complex projects at large, which I think they deserve, and it's.
I was gonna say, but off the top of my head, my anecdotal recollection would be we've got one withdrawal on average per meeting.
Yeah.
That's too high.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing I did look at, Steve, so Savannah, Annapolis, Newport, St. Augustine, New Orleans, and there's one more. I looked at other historic cities, they all meet once a month.
Beaufort, once a month.
I didn't look at that one, but I'll add that to my list. So I did some due diligence on that, and all of those historic cities meet once a month.
Yeah.
I think it's all good. I was
Yeah.
just, I can see that providing some heartache, but
Yeah.
I guess once people get used to it, that's just the way it is.
Exactly, you know,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit of the breeze because suddenly, you know, you defer it and you have to submit next week.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Where?
I mean, the
And
bottom
Grant-
line is the potential is you have longer meetings again, but.
Yeah,
we
but
will
only
meet
once a month. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean,
okay.
we've not come anywhere near our cap in 2024,
Yeah.
No,
particularly if we're not counting
Yeah,
vested
that's-
rights and things like that.
just generally, that's probably gonna be the truth for the indefinite short term.
And while the change to the appendix is more broad, the test that we're talking about is meant to last 6 months, and then we're gonna get all sorts of feedback and data and decide how we wanna move forward from there.
I don't remember, is that for small and DRB as well? Or
No, so
Who's small?
these changes which are broader, are for both BAR boards. DRB is not part of this test. We want to see how this goes before we start mucking around in DRB. The change for BAR is only the extension of between deadline and meeting time. So instead of the shortened time, but for us, it would be extension between deadline and meeting, as well as just once a month.
Thank you for your hard work.
Sure.
Yeah, let's-
I want to acknowledge Tori Parrish on that too, because we worked hard together when we were over.
So we've been talking about it for a long time. I think it's in proper order. It's obviously well edited and well thought out. And we do need a motion to approve this new procedure and the text.
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Ramos. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on policy change?
Yay in favor.
Ms. Socha,
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Metters,
Yeah.
Mr. Ramos, and myself, yeah, in favor. Thank you, BD.
Sure, and on a personal note, I just want to thank you for making my transition into this position a joy. I really enjoyed my time.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. That concludes our, yes,
Can I ask you a question?
yes.
I couldn't move a call to get here in time, and I wanted to hear what happened to make a comment on agenda item number 2. I live at 140 South Battery next to the vacant lot
Yes, ma'am.
that was asking for another extension.
Yes, ma'am. I'm glad to explain that. We've had a very brief agenda this evening, so it's no trouble. And thank you for coming here. We had a very abbreviated meeting. So ma'am, what happened is, the owners, the applicants are entitled to get 5 one-year renewals of their entitlement, which in this case, they have a conceptual approval for a new design to go on that site. They requested an extension. This is the last year that they can do so, but they're legally entitled to that, meaning they would either have to execute on their plan and go get their building permits, or they would need to reapply for conceptual approval because their ability to obtain extensions would lapse. But we approved that extension, which means that the applicant has until May 24th of 2025 to do something, or they would have to reapply.
I wanted to bring it to the board's attention that the maintenance of that property is very much lacking and a health hazard to the neighborhood. There is oftentimes standing water in the lot and small children going by. We live next door, it's a breeding ground for, all sorts of things. They have a fence around, except it's never up. It's on the stakes with black papers that are always at the ground, again, with children in the neighborhood. You've basically got a lot of black plastic laying on the ground. And they also, when they do maintain a property, they'll come at 8 o'clock on the Sunday morning and with leaf blowers. So I don't know who I take this up with.
So-
But there needs to
So
be.
that's not strictly our purview, but what we do have the ability to do is pass that information along to appropriate departments.
So that is livability, and once we officially end the meeting, you can talk to this gentleman right here, Travis, and he can help give you the contacts for
That's fantastic.
livability.
Yeah.
Sure.
And thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that concludes our meeting. Thank you.